Welcome to all of our students behind the scenes in our learning management system. I hope you're going through all the online tutorials and enjoying yourself. Every so often, as you've encountered, I like to bring in some new information for you, to bring in special guests, to interview them, and just to offer you bonuses and to make you have to watch me just that much more, but to also get to watch other people and to get some real benefit from that. So over the years, I've been on and off familiar with, never really in depth, to be honest, with the idea of emotional intelligence. And we have one of the specialists here with us today in emotional intelligence, Dr. Hank Clemons. So welcome, Dr. Hank.
Thank you.
And let me just read to you guys Dr. Hank's bio. Dr. Hank Clemons is the founder and CEO of the Society of Emotional Intelligence, a professional association dedicated to bringing emotional intelligence into practice in all walks of life, including schools, families, organizations, and communities. Dr. Hank is also an executive emotional intelligence coach to leaders and organizations. As a coach, he partners with individuals to identify their strengths and development areas that are used to create an action plan that leads to increased performance, productivity, and overall well-being. Dr. Hank is also a training partner of MHS, Multi-Health Systems, where he certifies individuals in the use of the EQI 2.0, the most widely used validated assessment on emotional intelligence in the market today. Once certified, individuals can purchase, administer, and provide feedback on the results of the assessment. Dr. Hank is one of a select group of individuals globally that's qualified to offer the service. And I was just reading all of that directly from hankclemons.com on the About Us page. So if you guys want to check out more about that, that's the first plug here for Dr. Hank. So thanks for being with us. Part of why you're here is, well, probably the reason you're here is because you're a graduate of our school. At least you only did the first 300 hours, but nobody's perfect.
I'm working on it. Perfection, that is.
There you go.
Well, but I'm already perfect.
We had that little discussion before we started. I said, Dr. Hank, how are you? He was like, just this close to better. I'm like, well, what do you need to feel better? And he's like, that's a good question. I'm like, I know we teach that in our school. And I said, it was going to take 20 days to get better, or 20 minutes, or maybe it could just be better now. And eventually we got to, hey, I feel better now. So we're both better now.
Right.
Awesome. Welcome. So we have a list of talking points we're going to go through. We're not pretending that we're not, we did plan this a little bit, but not much. So let's start with the first question. And Dr. Hank, I just want to hear whatever you want to say to our students. So the first question is, what is emotional intelligence?
Well, first of all, one of the things that often happens when people ask a question, someone will say, that's a good question. Well, in this case, that's a good question. There are multiple definitions for the term or concept of emotional intelligence, and one can Google that concept of emotional intelligence and really come up with what they may feel resonates with them. But for me, when I use the term emotional intelligence, it's more about having one's emotions work for them rather than against them. In other words, being intelligent with your emotions.
Mm.
Now, that's not the definition that you'll find published in a lot of publications, but for me, that's the one that I like to share.
To be intelligent with your emotions.
Yes.
And is there a founder of the whole EI movement? So is there such a author of all this or originator?
Well, like everything, there's always someone who says, I have an idea. And of course, they come up with an idea. And emotional intelligence is one of those. But it goes way back to, past year inventors, if you will, of emotional intelligence. There was a guy named Michael Beldock back in the early 60s who did some work around something that was called emotional intelligence. It's not what we call it today. In today's environment, Salovey and Mayer, John Mayer and Peter Salovey, would be the founders or the current founders of the concept of emotional intelligence. And of course, we have Daniel Goleman, who popularized the term emotional intelligence. So when we're using the term emotional intelligence, sort of what are we looking for? Are we looking for it from the business and leadership perspective? That would be Daniel Goleman. Or if we were looking at it from more of the scientific approach, that would be Peter Salve and John Mayer.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And how do you bring that to the world for yourself? You run the Society of Emotional Intelligence, is that correct?
Yes, yes.
Can you tell us about that?
Well, the Society of Emotional Intelligence would be pretty much like most professional associations. So if someone was interested in training, as an example, they would probably belong to ATD, or if they were interested in human resources management, they would belong to SHRM. So they go there, or they belong to those organizations, because that's where a person would go to get more information. That's where they would go to get certifications. That's where they would go to meet like-minded individuals. That's where they would go to share their ideas and sort of be buddy or friends or cohorts with others in that field. So the Society of Emotional Intelligence, its role is to be that for people who are interested in emotional intelligence.
Gotcha. And you offer training as well, aside from just the community, the society connection of it?
Yes,
Mhm.
one can get involved by being, let's say, a member. And if they are a member, they can attend seminars, workshops. Um, but yes, we offer some basic information around emotional intelligence, all the way up to, as you had mentioned in my bio, someone interested in getting certified in order to be able to administer, provide feedback, and or do coaching in the field of emotional intelligence.
That's
So it's from cradle to grave, one might say.
Gotcha. And why would one of our students, or even me, I haven't got really that into it. I get the idea that the more emotionally intelligent you are, the better. I kind of feel that hypnotherapy by default does that. But why would our graduates, why would I want to go deeper into this? How does it benefit a hypnotherapist?
Well, there's a couple of ways that I think about it, and maybe I can speak from my own perspective.
Hmm.
One, I've always been interested in hypnosis. So for me, it was just another step to be more emotionally aware, and that is to have hypnosis as a part of my knowledge base or technical toolkit, if you will. So when we talk about emotional intelligence, we're talking about one's emotions. Whether you're intelligent with them or not, we're talking about emotions. And often in the field of hypnosis, and of course you could shed a lot more light on that than I can, um, people emotions is what they have issues with. And so for me, it was looking at how can I pair those two things together and make one big one rather than having a little one plus something else. In other words, having hypnosis standing out there by itself and emotional intelligence standing out there by itself. Why not combine the two and use them when appropriate to help my client? So that was sort of the why behind it, if you will, and why I think anyone in the field of hypnosis may benefit from adding that, adding EI to their toolkit or toolbox or whatever those terms are that people sometimes use.
Gotcha. What would that look like in a session then? I'm like sincerely wondering how, and I'm not being, I hope it doesn't sound like I'm challenging. I'm just really actually curious. And I
Yeah,
think grad students would be curious. What would that look like in a session? So the little bit I know is that IQ, you can measure that, but it's pretty well locked in. Can't really change that much. EQ can be changed, as I understand it, but please correct me if I'm wrong. And then Would you assess a client in the beginning of the work and then maybe use hypnotherapy or other techniques that you would know about, and then assess them later on? How would it actually occur in a protocol of hypnotherapy sessions?
Wow. Within a hypnotherapy session, I'm not quite sure what the protocol might be in terms of a process, if you will. And
Hmm,
I'm going to use the term process just rather than protocol, just for me speaking on this right now.
sure.
Uh, but if a client comes to me, okay, he comes to me, now use he, it could be a she, or it could be other. But if a person comes to me, they usually come to me with an issue that they feel or believe is somehow limiting them in some way or another. Okay. And they usually tell me about what it is. They may say anxiety as an example. Well, they're coming to a quote therapist, or they're coming to someone to help them be able to have better control of that issue called anxiety. And if I can back up just for a second, because sometimes when I get into this, one of the things that I'm looking at is when a person has a high degree of anxiety, I say that they are emotionally out of balance. Okay. And so my goal is to get them back into emotional balance. So in order sometimes to do that, we may do some activities like deep breathing, or they may do some affirmation, any number of things to help them be able to get better control of this thing called anxiety. Okay. Now there are other times when a person just have this thing and they won't let go, whatever it is. It's something that they've been treated badly by someone, and they may not feel that they can let that go. Okay, so through hypnotic suggestion, they may be willing to release whatever that is that they're holding on to. And so that's how I see hypnosis playing a role in my emotional intelligence session that I'm having with the client.
Mm, okay, I hear you. So if a person has anxiety or holding on to something like anger, I hear you saying we would apply different techniques to help to make that better, right? That's what we essentially do in hypnotherapy. I'm curious in the EI model with this idea in relationship to IQ, that we have like an IQ score. Do you actually score your clients for their EQ, like before and after applying whatever technique you would use? I'm really just curious because you mentioned like affirmations and things like a hypnotherapist might do. But I'm really curious what an EI person would do. Like, let's say you didn't know hypnosis, and I just came to you and said, Dr. Hake, I want a session really focused on EI. Am I being evaluated for what my EI is?
Okay, one can take an EI assessment or an EQ assessment to see what their emotional quotient currently is, just like they can take an IQ test to see what their intelligence quotient currently is. And once they've done that, if they don't make any changes, if they don't go through any training, or if they don't go through anything to help them improve in that, and they, let's say, take that emotional quotient assessment 3 months later, the scores are going to be about the same. But if they've gone through and they've practiced deep breathing and they've practiced affirmations and what have you, so that they are now better off than when they came in, their scores are going to be different.
I gotcha. And do you personally measure, do you do those assessments with your clients?
Yes and no. Okay. Most of the time, no,
Mhm.
because it's not necessary, I don't believe, because based on their admissions, based on the kinds of things that they talk about, based on what they share in terms of what they're experiencing now versus what they were experiencing then, it gives us some indication that there's been improvement in that area. So they're back closer to emotional balance than they were when they came in. So it's sort of like taking the car in for a wheel balance, and it's not wearing so much unevenly after you get the wheel balanced or the tires balanced. So when they leave our session, they're better off than when they came in.
Okay, certainly, which I feel would be the intention, right, of any good working
Yeah.
relationship. I find it interesting that you'll do some like deep breathing affirmations, but you don't really measure the EQ. I'm still working to understand why, or how would you as an EQ practitioner, because in some ways I'm working to plug people into your training, right? But I'm working to understand if you're just doing deep breathing and affirmations with students learning in our school, right, and a lot more, what's the value of adding in the understanding of EI or EQ if we're not actually most of the time measuring or assessing where they are before and after? What value does EQ training bring to or EI training bring to the table?
Okay, so what if I hear you correctly, and help me if I'm missing something here? You're saying if we're not measuring before and after, how do we necessarily know that there's been improvement?
It's sort of asking that. I'm more asking what is the value for our students to go through EI training. Um, that's really what I'm looking for. But I can see, because for us, this is a subjective assessment from the client, their evaluation of how they feel before and after. Right? I'll see a client a week later. I'll say, "How are you doing?" They go, "Great. I've been feeling so good. I've been so peaceful during the week. My mind is quiet. I'm being nice to myself. I'm eating healthy." Right? And they're happy. We're happy. We never really measure that. So I could get that you don't measure that either. I'm just still working to understand what is it about EI that benefits? What's the value in that benefits us as hypnotherapists to work with our clients if we're not measuring?
Okay, got you. Well, because I think there's always more than one tool for one's toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, there are multiple screwdrivers and multiple, kinds of hammers that you use for different tools. So someone may be in the work environment, we call it the organizational work environment, and that may be where the organization is. The organization is full into emotional intelligence, and by implementing emotional intelligence, uh, they can have better leaders, they can reduce turnover, they can, have better communication with teams. So then, even though someone has hypnosis as a part of their skill in an organization, sometimes the organization isn't as open to hypnosis as it will be to emotional intelligence. So there needs to be more than one way to approach accomplishing an objective. And the objective in this organization or an organization may be improvement in certain areas. And so they more buy into the idea of emotional intelligence and maybe not as much into hypnosis.
Gotcha. So if somebody graduates our school, and let's say they're calling themselves, maybe our most professional title would be certified clinical hypnotherapist or certified interpersonal hypnotherapist. Maybe they don't say transpersonal in an organization. I hear that with our credentials, they could go into an organization as an EI practitioner, have other tools in their bag of tricks beyond just what we train them in the hypnosis school. So I hear you're saying it would open career doors for them, right, to go into corporations, organizations, and have other skill sets that might be more appropriate. Instead of hypnotizing all the employees, there would be other techniques to work with. Is that what I'm getting out of that?
Yes, yes, yes.
Nice. What about with individual clients? So I've worked with corporation, doctors' offices, those type of things, and that's really rewarding. It's a wonderful part of our profession to go
Good.
out and network and be part of other organizations and teams for sure. But just in private practice, one-on-one, one-on-one with our clients, I love to know. I kind of like the idea in some ways of doing that assessment before. I'm actually curious. Like I did one before, and I'd love to do it again. And so I can probably find them in my hard drive. Like, how was I before, and where am I now when it comes to emotional tear or something, subconscious tear. Now, yeah. So yeah, I'm still interested in on the one-on-one work with our clients, how we might apply some of these ideas.
Okay, and I do one-on-one with a number of clients, around emotional intelligence, because that's where their interest is. That's what they come for, and that's what my shield, if you will, says. In addition to this, I also do that, and so most people that I see have a feeling for and understand emotional intelligence, and that works well for them. And then there are those that says, "Oh, you do hypnosis also?" And the answer is yes. And they say, "Well, I've never experienced that before. Could you help me with that or whatever?" Or there have been those that have said, "I still find it tough to, do this or do that." I said, perhaps, hypnotic suggestion may be appropriate or beneficial. And they go, "Oh, okay, well, let's try it." So I think, having multiple skills is a plus.
Oh, absolutely. I remember a client of mine, you used that idea about having more tools in your bag of tricks than just like a screwdriver. I was insisting with this client that there's a root cause to everything. We need to do hypnotic regression. And we did it a couple of times, and we never really found anything that was causing his problem. And he said, so he gave me that quote, I don't remember exactly. It was something like, Matthew, if you're a hammer, all you see is nails. uh, and it's pretty much
Yeah,
what you said, the idea of having different tools. If you only have a hammer, you're just going to hit things to make it better. So I'm still working to understand, though. I'm going to push you a little bit because I feel like our listeners probably are thinking the same thing. You didn't really answer the question yet, but I'm sure you have the answers because you do this professionally, right? So if I came to you with anxiety and I said, Dr. Hank, I'm really anxious. If you didn't have hypnosis in your bag of tricks, right, which thank God you do because it's such good stuff. But if you didn't have hypnosis, if you only could apply EI type of modalities for me, what would you do to help me to feel better in the EI model?
if I only had EI, is what you're saying. If I only had
Yeah,
EI,
or whatever other credentials you have. I know you're a doctor. I don't know. I didn't research too much all about you. I trust you. So obviously you have other training as well. So yeah, without hypnosis as an EI practitioner, what would you do to help me with anxiety?
well, it may be important for me to know, quote, my limitations, as the saying goes, and whatever my limitations are. If I discover that I'm not able to help you with anxiety, then I refer you. I mean, that's essentially what we do when it comes to, quote, mental health or people that may need medication or something. I don't do that. So I need to know, where, you know, I need to stay in my lane, as the saying goes.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. Okay. So you and I are talking about, I'm going to be really just transparent here, doing a CEU course for our students. And I want them to be able to watch this video and feel, wow, I so want to go through those 8 hours of CEUs to learn about EI. I want to do some of Dr. Hank's training. And yet, just to be honest, when I say, how would you help me with anxiety if you didn't have hypnosis? Um, I hear you saying you might not be able to, you'd have to refer me out. So I'm not here to challenge you. I just really want to understand how would we use EI techniques? What tools? All right. So if it's not a hammer, let's say hypnosis is a hammer. What's the screwdriver? What techniques? What tools would we apply to anxiety so our students could know? Wow, if I study Dr. Hank's stuff, because I might want to do it too. I have these other tools in my bag of tricks to help
Well,
on with, let's say, anxiety.
well, I guess, Matthew, one of the really, really important things to understand is that each person is an individual.
Mhm.
So his or her anxiety is going to probably be different. So we may need to first understand what is this person really anxious about. Okay, and depending on what he is anxious about, it may fall in line with the fact that they're they're low on optimism, as an example. They're not a very optimistic person. So we may need to create and develop optimism or activities to help them build or develop their optimism. Or let's say something that we call self-regard is sort of like self-esteem. If it's low, they may have a tendency not to be that enthusiastic about something. We may need to help them create or develop their self-regard by using some activities. And it can be activities as simple as watching a television show and then telling you what you saw. I mean, it it depends. That's one of the things that we try to make sure that we don't do, and that is to say, okay, if you have this, this is what we're going to do to help you get over this. Is first let us understand what's causing this. And then once we do that, we have a number of things that you might want to try and see if that works for you.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha. So yeah, here, if I come to you with anxiety, you would want to assess what's really going on. You wouldn't want to pigeonhole me and say, oh, you have this, therefore apply this technique. So I hear that the techniques would be customized for the person. And let's say I came in with lack of optimism and low self-regard, low self-esteem. One of the techniques I hear so far is you might give me an assignment, activities. I hear generally the idea of activities. Is it more of like a cognitive behavioral approach that you're taking because of other training that you do have? So if I were to go watch a TV show, as you said, come back and report what I saw, is that coming from the EI model, from the CBT model, or I'm still really interested in the techniques you would apply if you didn't have hypnotherapy training.
Oh, okay. So it may be coming from, what they sometimes call talk therapy, or maybe coming from what sometimes people call, cognitive behavioral techniques. In other words, there are generally some techniques that may cross disciplines that can be applied in emotional intelligence as well as hypnosis. Again, we don't know that, but that's a possibility. There are some that looked at, that came once and said, we hear that, that you do something called eye movement therapy. Well, we know that we picked that up as a part of, hypnosis training, but that's not what the person was looking at or thinking about when they came asking about it. They just heard that it was a technique that could help them get through or forget, some issues that they were dealing with. So again, I think there's some approaches that probably can be used regards to the field, whether it's hypnosis or emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so yeah, still gonna keep drilling on this because I'm really curious myself. Because if we took even CBT aside, because our students aren't trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, I personally feel that that's relegated to the field of those who've gone through like university education for mental health counseling, right? They learn that, they become talk therapists, and honestly, a lot of them come to us realizing they're lacking skill sets, right? That the tools they have really didn't work out. Being really frank, I had a client, she was I think a mental health counselor, social worker, and we decided to do an exchange instead of her paying me. And I came to her office and I said, all right, I am dealing with anxiety and help me with that. And she goes, okay, well, we're just going to talk about it. And I'm like, okay. And we talked for like 10 minutes. I'm like, what are you going to do to help me with my anxiety? And she goes, well, we're just going to talk and work to figure it out. I'm like, no, like really, like I want you to help me with this. I don't want to just talk about it. I want to feel better after the session. And I said, if you came to me, I would do hypnotic programming, parts therapy, eye movement therapy, hypnotic regression, breath work. I would apply modalities and I would help you to feel better. And then we kept talking a little bit and she didn't really have any answer for me. We just kind of kept talking. She was analyzing, asking questions. And I said, if you came to me, I would do this, 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 this. And she goes, Matthew, it hurt the first time you said it. So I don't mean to at all feel like I'm putting you or even that therapist on the spot. Is just more of, I'm so interested in, like, so if we put, with that said, if we put CBT aside, or talk therapy, that idea, and if we put hypnotherapy aside, and I said, I really want to learn EI. I'm working to promote EI right now, but I need to understand what if we're not measuring their EQ most of the time. Like if I read a few books on EI, what would be or I did one of your trainings, what would be the takeaway that would benefit me as a private practitioner?
Okay. Well, again, there are different approaches to emotional intelligence. So some of the theories will have 5 models, some may have 4 models. It all comes down to 2 things. There's self and there's other. And we're looking at, managing emotions being one, okay? And also the second part to that is what they would call relationship. And so it's kind of looking at some basic things in terms of using emotional intelligence to understand people's emotions, perhaps where they come from, how to best manage them or deal with them, how to best use them to develop and maintain social relationships of yourself with yourself and or others. So what you would read or take away from that is the concept of emotional intelligence, what it's supposed to be, and what are the core areas that you're going to focus on. Now, within those core 4 areas, for most anyway, there are these sub areas. So for instance, like we were talking, self-awareness, that would be a core area. A sub area may be self-regard or self-esteem or emotional awareness. So looking at it from that perspective, you just dig deeper, you go deeper and deeper into those 4 areas to find a specific area that you want to focus on or attach. So again, it would be, I'm going to just use a car analogy. You have a big old vehicle, you want to get to the parts of the vehicle so that you can determine which parts are most appropriate for you to deal with. You hear a rattle in the car. You go, something is causing this rattle. It's not the doors there, it's shut tight. It turns out it's something that fell on the floor, but maybe that's not a good way to describe it, but you would get what you need. In other words, it's kind of tough to compare what you do in hypnosis with what they do or I do in emotional intelligence. This is sort of like 2 different fields.
Oh yeah, well that's why we're talking, because I really want to understand what you do. I'm hearing, because I'm looking for the value proposition. Where's the value? And there has to be, right? I'm complimenting you in that way, not challenging you. I'm just working to pull out of you as the interviewer. Where's the value? What I hear, and you get this from lots of different fields, there's like a different mindset you turn on, a different filter. And so when I'm listening to a client, if I'm understanding you, I might say, all right, is it self or other? And okay, this issue is I'm honing in, and this is self, or is it relationship based? And this is like self, and then maybe it's, you said self-awareness. Okay, they're not really self-aware. I guess I'm hearing you say there's a mindset. One thing I'm sure I could see I could get out of EI training is a mindset that helps me to determine where the issue is with the client, what part of the car is broken. And then once I say, oh, this is a self-awareness issue, you sent me, I think I can find it quickly, an email as we've been collaborating together. I did some graphic design for our potential CEU course, and there were 8 ideas. And honestly, that just came from stock art. I didn't put those in there. But then you said, Here's the sequence topics for the wheel in the CEU course. Self-awareness, number 1, you just mentioned. Self-regard, you've talked about. Assertiveness, number 3. 4, interpersonal relationship. 5, empathy. 6, reality testing. 7, flexibility. 8, optimism. Maybe you talk more about those, and what I hear you telling me now is if I were sitting with a client, I could assess without doing their EQ score, I could assess which area of those 8 things are out of balance, if I'm hearing you correctly. And then I could apply whatever technique I'm going to help to get that back into balance. Could you elaborate more on that or share what your thoughts are there?
Yes, yes, you could come up with what you think might be where we'll just use the term, the area that they're lacking, okay, that's not where their strength is, or something like that. So you could do that without doing an assessment. However, sometimes it's good to have done an assessment because the assessment allows you to have what we call a starting point or talking points to get them started. In other words, if you just say, well, it sounds to me like, that may be okay, However, if they take an assessment, it's sort of like you now have 2 data points. It sounds to me like, and here's what the assessment is saying.
Gotcha. So I hear you saying you don't always do the EQ, the assessment, but it can be value in it. I'm sure there must be, right? And the little bit I know about this, it seems like there would be value in being able to say, and I don't know how the scale works, but we'll say in my mind from 0 to 100, if 100 is the highest you can get, if the client is first assessed at a 50, right, we want to get them above whatever functional or, higher level of functioning is, let's say above average, 70, or you can tell me more about how you might measure it if that's relevant here. But I think at the beginning of the work, and at the end of the work, if that scale is measurably different, that seems really beneficial. And also in the beginning of the assessment and those 8 areas of the wheel, help me to assess where's this client at? Where are the deficiencies? Where are they? Where are the weaknesses or the places? I think the way we would say it is the places for improvement, right? Where are the places they can improve? But if we could assess those in the beginning, it would make sense. I could have a more strategic approach to how I'm going to help. Like if I realize one of your things on your wheel, which we work with, is assertiveness training. So if I realize through the assessment or just an intake, this person lacks assertiveness training, then I can take assertiveness skill sets, however I deliver those through hypnosis or coaching or whatever, but I can help to improve that area of their life. Am I getting it?
Yeah, and that's a good one, but let me back up a little bit, because when one takes an assessment, particularly the assessment that we often will use, and that's the EQI, it is not to put the person in a block and say, you are strong here, so you're okay, or you are weak here, so you're not okay. Because emotions or emotional intelligence is contextual within itself. In other words, if we look at assertiveness, okay, when we measured assertiveness, we're not measuring assertiveness in everything this person does, okay, but they get a score. It's a general assertiveness score. Now, what we need to do, and this is where my work comes in, one-on-one, what we need to do is, in what situations, if you will, is this person assertive, and in what situation are they not assertive? Maybe when they're out on the soccer field coaching soccer, they're as assertive as they need to be, okay, no problem. But when it comes to leading their work team, they're not very assertive at all. And what happens is their boss writes them up or puts in their performance appraisal that they lack assertiveness. Well, they don't lack assertiveness in everything they do. They just simply lack assertiveness in terms of managing or supervising their work team. So now what I'm doing is I'm having to help them recognize, understand, and come up with ways to deal with the lack of assertiveness in working with their work team, which is going to be altogether different in terms of the assertiveness that they display when they're doing soccer coaching, as an example.
Hmm.
So the assessment does not say this is where you are in everything that there is in your life. It acts as a starting point. It is a discussion opener. Here's the report. Here's some of the things that it's saying. Let's talk about these and see how they apply to you or to the situation in which we're talking about. Okay.
Gotcha. That's really helpful. I'm feeling like I'm getting the answer I'm looking for because I know it's there. It's like what I see when I think of those 8 components, and we just zoomed into assertiveness. Then I could zoom in a little deeper into, like in hypnotherapy, we have the idea of self-esteem, and then there's characterological self-esteem and situational self-esteem. Right. And because I know that, because I'm trained in that, I can listen to the client and say, this is characterological. This has been there your whole life. It blankets through everything you do. Or this is situational. But without that training, without that filter, it's not necessarily what I'm not hearing from you yet are very specific techniques to use. I'm hearing at this stage more of valuing my intake, right? Or I can hear ways to work with organizations that are really helpful here. Yet for one-on-one work, I can listen to the client with a whole new level of understanding about those 8 components. I can zone into those. I can unpack that and say, okay, there's 2 aspects here. Or at least when I relate that to self-esteem, like characterological, situational, or like here, I could say, in NLP, we would call it an ecology check. I would say, all right, where is that happening at work? Is it happening at home? Is it happening in the soccer field? Right. And then, so you just zoomed in and realized, okay, it's happening at work for this person. And then we could, so it just helps us to perhaps get, at least at this point in the intake stage of things, it helps us to get more clear about what we're looking to work on. We're not
Right.
measuring them and saying, oh, yeah, you're not good in relationships, you're not good at work. You definitely, obviously, I don't think you would ever label them as that and lock them into that. The idea is to improve that. Uh, so yeah, how does that work with the assessment though? Is it a scale from like 0 to 100 if we did that EQI assessment on somebody?
Well, it's not a 0 to 100 scale, but it is a scale that shows whether, how a person shows up in the various scales and subscales that we were talking about, of those 8 things that actually there's 15 of them. I just kind of broke it down into the 8 that I thought we would probably get a chance to talk about. But it looks at all 15 of them and it says whether this person is skilled at using that thing. Let's say empathy. Some people know how to be empathic. Some people don't know how to be empathic, or when to be empathic, or who to be empathic with or not. So if it shows that they are low in that skill area, and we see emotional intelligence as a skill as well as an ability, we look at, if they are or are not, and if they are not, is it important that they work on developing that or being that or improving that? It may or may not be. It just depends. That's why I was saying that it's in the context. So a person can get a low score, but it's not an important area for them to, let's say, work on. Or they can get a high score, and because they have a high score, they still may need to work on it because what they find within the organization is that's a highly valued skill. So you want to be even better at it.
Nice. I like hearing this. It's about the context. It's not a label or you've taken a person out of the context of reality, right? They're part of everything. You're not just saying you're the separate individual who lacks in this way. Like in this context, if you want to, or if the situation warrants it, we can improve this aspect of your life.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah, I can hear a lot of value in as a hypnotherapist during my intake. If I did the EQI, if that's the way to say it, that assessment, and if I have this filter of 15 things to look at to zone in on, I can actually it's kind of a marketing thing for you're getting your client to do more sessions. We're not there to ever prolong healing them, right? Say, well, instead of doing it in 2, I'll do it in 4 so I can make more money. We would never do that. That's unethical. Yet if we can help them to see, you've got a lot of issues, right? And I can help you with these issues by doing the assessment, like what I do with my client, what I used to do when I was in full-time practice with my clients. They would come in and say, I want to work in this issue, like stop smoking. I say, okay, fine. But I'd like you to make a list of everything wrong in your life. Tell me all the problems, negative beliefs, negative emotions, negative behaviors, relationship issues, whatever. And I think, this 15 could really help to tell me where your challenges are in these areas. But I could hear, you would do that differently. What I was doing with my clients was to have them write the whole list of all their problems. Then when they would come in, I would say, yeah, I can help you to stop smoking, but I could also help you with this, 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 this. You could pay for a 3-hour package and you can do just the smoking, or you could do a 20-hour package and you could deal with all this stuff. And I would sell 20-hour packages, a few of those a week, which is quite a few extra $1,000 every week by upping the sell, not to prolong their healing, but to show them just how valuable I am. So I can imagine this filter to say, I'm an emotional intelligence practitioner and I do the assessment. If that was, because you're saying you don't do it all the time, but if I did the assessment and I filter it through those 15 components, I can unpack a lot of what's going on in the client to show them where I'm valuable as a hypnotherapist to help them to reach their goals in all those categories. Like for me, I call that life mastery, where every category of your life is successful. It's not static. You're always adjusting and improving those levels, making them better, as we talked about when we started. But I think just being able to chunk down those categories is really helpful.
Yeah. Fortunately, unfortunately, the way that the instrument is already designed, what we want to do with the client is find the one that they feel is going to pay them the biggest dividend, to improve in. That's usually the approach, is to, if we uncover that it was reality testing and empathy, then that's the one that we want to focus on. And as soon as they feel or believe that they no longer have that issue, then we don't necessarily move towards a secondary or tertiary issue, unless, of course, they say, I want to take a look at some other thing while I'm looking at this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. So when like the way I work as a hypnotherapist, the client comes in. I had one the other day. It was a good example of what I'm about to say.
Okay.
I said, how can I help you today? And she's like, I'm good. I've been feeling great all week. I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad I really helped you. Like that was a good first session. Now we're here for the second session. What would you like to work on? And she's like, I don't know. I said, well, okay, well, here's what happens. When a client comes in and says, I'm great, but they're there because the session's already scheduled or it's paid for, and they're just going to show up because they already paid for it, then I usually make the choice that, okay, we can clear your blocks. We can do things like breath work or hypnotic regression, or we can just move towards a positive. We could do NLP or life mastery work, but to have that flexibility. So I might say to that client, well, actually, I have 2 things here, but yeah, I could say to that client, we could go in through a Eqi assessment. I could listen to you from that perspective, show you where there's weaknesses or places that need improvement, help you to grow in those as you might want to. So I can hear the value in that and just helping clients to know what they do want to work on. Like they might not realize what they're lacking. Like you don't know what you don't know until you know it. So I might not even know about this idea of assertiveness training until someone does this assessment, points that out to me and says, this is the direction we could go. So I really can see, and I'm looking to, I can really see the value in having those filters to help to direct my client in ways that it could be really beneficial for them. And then, yeah, even though they come in, the other thing I want to say is their subjective experience of what's bothering them. When they say, like whether they say something's bothering me or not, I can say, yeah, but if we do this assessment, there's a lot of other things you don't even realize that we can improve upon aside from what you think is bothering you.
That's certainly true. I mean, and that's why I said the assessment itself is sort of that discussion starter. It's what sort of opens up the person, if you will, to explore things that they otherwise may not have thought about. And certainly you, as a practitioner, don't know because this is the first time you've seen them. So once that process begins, you can always ask the questions. Well, what about this? What about that? Have you thought about this? Or as Dr. Phil says on his television show, how's that working for you?
Right. Right, right. So yeah, I would imagine with us as practitioners, it's kind of like playing chess, where if you really know how to play, you're many moves ahead of your opponent. And I like the idea in NLP or other place I've heard it said, the more conscious force is the controlling element of a situation, or the more flexible force is the controlling element of a situation. So if they come in and they say, yeah, I have interpersonal relationship issues. Uh, I would have a lot more knowledge about relationships than them because I've done this type of specialized training, right? And I just
Right.
understand a lot more about what's going on in their mind. So I can help them to explore. I could say, as a hypnotherapist, I might only have the skill set to say, tell me more, right? What I hear you saying is, and all they're going to do is tell me their subjective experience of negative relationships, and I'm going to work on what they told me. But what I'm hearing as an EI practitioner, I would be able to say, okay, well, in relationships, we have your relationship with your, I'm making this up, please elaborate for me. You have a relationship with yourself, a relationship with other people, because you said self and other. You have a
Right.
relationship perhaps with the divine, or in thinking of other things you can have a relationship with, your boss. But if I can unpack the relationship category, I would imagine I have a lot more to talk about than just tell me more. Or what I hear you saying is, and I think there's tremendous value in the hypnotherapy model of just saying, tell me more. Whatever they present is upsetting them, I help to resolve that. Right? And that's beautiful. I'm not playing the judge. I don't have to know very much. And sometimes I am concerned, I'd love to hear you respond to this, about having too much knowledge. Right? Where I feel like I'm very, very effective in my work and the way I train our students to just say, how can I help you today? And whatever they say, that's their issue, and that's what we're going to work on. So I'm wondering, is having too much knowledge of these filters and how you direct the person to go, I can see, and that's my whole intention here, is to find the benefit of EI work. Is it beneficial to have these filters, or is it beneficial sometimes just to let them go?
Well, on the real personal level, I always try to reach the client or reach the person where they are. Okay. Because if I meet them where they are, then they are more likely than not be more open to begin that discussion, to begin talking about how they feel or what's bothering them or what's going on and stuff like that. Uh, if I come across, I think, uh, and this has been my experience, if I come across as all-knowing, then what I'm doing is I am already putting them somewhere where they are not. And I'd rather be where they are than where they are not.
Mhm.
And so if I need to, quote, dumb it down, it's not really dumbing it down at all. It's just meeting the person where he or she is. And I think that's the best way.
Beautiful. And to me, that's what hypnotherapy is all about, right? By not having the specialized skill sets, I just say, how can I help you today? Whatever they tell me is that's where I'm going to meet them. And I agree. It's never dumbing it down. It's really pacing and leading. I pace their reality. I mirror and match where they're at. I drop until like I hear you saying you're sad. I hear you saying you're angry. And then I apply techniques to help to make that better. To me, that's what hypnotherapy has been about. I guess we kind of came full circle in a lot of ways to me trying to understand the value of EI is if I just meet a person where they're at, why would I apply these other filters to them to say, well, there's 15 different areas. You're lacking in some of these areas. Would you like to work on those? Is there still merit to bringing that into the equation, even though we both agree the highest level is just meet them where they're at? Because that's what I heard you say, and that's definitely what I would agree with. But yeah, is there still value to bring in those 15 different components?
Oh, I
During,
think so.
uh,
I think so because I think, what happens is you meet the person where he is or she is, and then you take them, and I use the term take them, to where they need to be or want to go based on you know, your experience, your knowledge, and based on what you know about them, or based on what you discover about them. In other words, just because you meet them where they are doesn't mean that's where you stay. Uh,
Mhm.
yeah, you do want to raise them, as we say in some circles. Uh, so having those other skills, I think, is very, very important because now you have, back to the old toolbox thing, now you have other places to go, other things that you can use to help them be the best person, as we sometimes say, or sometimes people say, to be their best self. You know, that's
Mhm.
where some people will come and, I want to be my best self. Well, what does your best self look like? You know, what is your best self? You know, let's talk about things that would help make you a best self, you know, and then they start to describe those things, and maybe there's some things that you do that can help them get there, you know.
Right on. Yeah, that I can see with our life mastery course. So if I meet them where they're at, and then I say, oh, and by the way, I can help you to achieve success in your spirituality, your mental emotional health, your physical health, your career and finances, your relationships, your housing situation, your transportation situation, your free time and recreation, your vacation, travel, hobbies
Mhm.
categories. And if I help to chunk down a whole person into those approximately 10 categories that I use as a filter, then I can offer, and we can help you to be your best self in all of these categories. Because I brought that into our training, I know our students can upsell their clients with that as well. So meet them where they're at, but show them how to be their best self through a certain model. And I guess I'm hearing from you, the EI model helps them to do that with a different structure, perhaps those 15 components or that assessment as opposed to other things that we might bring in.
Right, yes, yes.
Hmm.
It's just, and if I don't want to minimize the way that it sounds, but I say it's another approach, it's just another tool to help them get to where they either want to be or where they need to be, you know.
Right. Right. And need to be might be in a context like at your job or in your relationship.
Right,
Right. So yeah, in summary, I'm hearing and yeah, I want to hear the value. I think there'd be a lot more if we had hours and hours to talk about this. Uh, but I'm definitely hearing value for me as a practitioner with my clients. I'm hearing how I could bring this into organizations, right? If I want to be more of a corporate executive type of coach, I can go in there and not just be a hypnotist, but I can go in and say I can help your employees to improve their EI for better relationship skills, better assertiveness, better self-awareness, working better in teams. All right, so that opens up a huge career opportunity for me. And as a hypnotherapist, I can get a lot of clients. If I interact with 100 employees in an organization, I'm going to walk away with 10 clients easily from meeting all those people. In conclusion, what other places the EI people go that benefits them in a career?
what other places, help me with that one.
Besides, because I have private practice, I hear that's one. Like our graduates can be in private practice, and they could also call themselves EI practitioners, and they're going to probably get more clients because of that. It's another credential. It gives them more skill sets and other filters and skills and filters that we've been talking about. So I hear you can bring it into private practice. You can bring it into corporations. What else? You can bring it into your interpersonal relationships, right? It's going to benefit you as a person, I would imagine, to know
Right.
how to talk to your spouse or whoever if you're more so. Yeah, what other areas? There's going to be private practice, corporations, any other places that people use EI?
Yeah, well, there's probably no place that EI is not used or can be used. Uh, there, we get people that are coaches almost all the time that want to be able to coach from an EI perspective or use EI in their coaching or coach others on how to use their EI. So coaching is one. Speaking of coaching, you know, a couple of years ago, the for those that are in football, um, the football team, the Philadelphia Eagles, their head coach said, well, no, the owner of the team said the next head coach that he hires need to be skilled in emotional intelligence. Now, that was sort of out of the blue for to hear them say in football, you got this big manly sport where people are thumping each other, but his coach had to be an emotionally intelligent coach in order to be able to work with the players. So I think, the field of emotional intelligence is fairly limitless in terms of using the skill. We find that often in ministry, we've had a number of ministers who have come to classes wanting to be able to work with their uh, uh, direct reports, whether they be the deacons or whatever within their church. We had some that were into church planting that wanted to make sure that people that they brought in to plant new churches were skilled in emotional intelligence. We hear it often in the work environment, not just work environment, but in interviewing skills. We want the interviewer to be able to interview using the skills of emotional intelligence for interviewing purposes. Uh, Academia, even if it's just teaching, but more and more you find in schools, teachers teaching young kids what is called social and emotional learning, or etiquette, as we used to call it, but how to play in the same sandbox together. So it's fairly limitless at this point in time, and so whatever field a person goes into, I think they can just sort of look to the left or right, and they can probably see how emotional intelligence is used or is helpful. As a matter of fact, the World Economic Organization a couple of years ago came out with, and the World Economic Organization is a think tank out of the Europe. They're based in Switzerland. And essentially what they do is they interview HR managers from around the world. And one of the things they did when they interviewed these HR managers from around the world, they said, here are the top 20 skills that will be most important in the year 2020. And number 6 was the concept of emotional intelligence. But also there was critical thinking, problem solving, decision making, all which falls into the realm of emotional intelligence. So it's fairly limitless. I know you didn't ask me all of this, but I mean, a person can use those skills anywhere they go.
Yeah, no, that was great. That is very much what I was asking, that where can we use this? And as I'm listening, as I'm about to say, all right, we're going to be creating a CEU course together, and we've talked about that. We'll decide once we're done with the video. But I'm going to say I would like to move ahead with it because I'm seeing a lot of value. I'm seeing how for our admissions department, we could have our admissions director, the person who answers the phones, screen students with an EI filter, because we check for their emotional intelligence in the best way we can, but without training someone in that or hiring. I keep growing the school and our association, all my other projects, and I'm creating bigger and bigger teams. But I don't know what I don't know. And I imagine after going through, we're talking about creating the 8-hour CEU course, so our students can check that out now in the shop. If it's there, then we obviously decide to go ahead with it. And then we said, hey, this would be a good thing for our graduates. At this point, I think it is. And I think it'd be good for me. It'd be good for our key staff members and our student services department, knowing how to interact with students if they're having their own emotional upset, right? By putting on the EI filter, or in just the admissions part, or the HR part of running the association. I could see it might be easy to say, oh, hypnosis is so great, I don't need anything else, but that's extremely ridiculous, right? To say I have the only skill that I need. I love being able to bring in other skills. I'm very passionate about hypnotherapy, of course. I'm specialized in that, but I would never want our students to think it's the only thing they should do. I used to feel, or only for a brief moment when I was opening the school, that I'm going to create lots of mini Matthews, just lots of people who do what I do. Then I realized really quickly, that's not what it's all about at all. That's craziness, actually. I'm here to unfold the greatness in every single person who goes through this training and help them to be their best self in all those categories, whatever those categories are, but to be their best self. And right. I hear that the more we can empower people with, within the context of what we do, like coaching or EI, and the different modalities that are our ways of thinking, that are complementary to what we do, that are adjuncts to what we do. And I can really see this as an adjunct. And I was hoping I could before we started this discussion. And at the end, I do. I do feel it would be a really good adjunct for, I guess, anybody. It's like you said, that's where you just concluded it with was, you didn't mean to go into, he's like, not all those categories, but yeah, like it works in every aspect of your life is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I know, and I would like to think that I'm a better person because of EI. I'm, I tend to be more socially responsible, if you will, you know. I tend to be more, I tend to have higher self-regard as a result. Now, having said that, I don't know if that was just my own work on me or because, you know, I've been involved in emotional intelligence for a number of years. But I think, you know, one will certainly apply emotional intelligence to themselves once they got involved in it, you know. That's just seeming to be a natural outcome. You know, in one of my books, I talk about the hierarchy of emotional intelligence, the conceptual level when people are learning about it, the operational level when people are applying it, and then there's the authentic level when people are living it. You know, and I think when you get to the authentic level, if you choose to go that direction, then you know you're going to feel well, not just feel, but we were talking about that better thing to start. That's when that better thing is there, you know, because it's who you are, it's your values, it's what you believe in, it's how you treat others. Yes.
Yeah, I hear that summarized in the self-awareness idea, right? That you're a better person for whatever reason, but certainly because you brought EI understanding into your life, right? You can't read these books and go through these trainings and not walk away as a better person and ideally as a better facilitator or just a better person in your relationships in any type of relationship you're having corporate or as a spiritual leader, like if you're running a church or whatnot, I just HR. I can see it benefiting everything. I'm going to take a moment and do screen share and just show everybody this is the page I read from your website. So hankclemons.com and then where is it? Oh, that's not it. For our school, Institute of Hypnotherapy.com. If you go to our shop, I have here I had to change this 21 ways to improve emotional intelligence to just improve emotional intelligence by Dr. Hank Clemons because that was putting you at the very top of our list. So if people just scroll down a little bit, you're right there in the third line. Could your emotional intelligence be holding you back by Dr. Hank Clemons? Eqi is for everyone and 21 ways to improve your emotional intelligence. So there's your plug. I look forward to, let me stop sharing. Yeah, let me just be sure I stop sharing. Yeah. Yeah, I look forward to collaborating with you on a CEU course, and I believe you'll be presenting at a future conference with us. We have that in the works. So really thank you for being my guest today. I always love learning more about this stuff. Usually I'm always the teacher, and it's always nice saying, oh, this is something I want to learn, and that's cool. It's exciting. I know like when our students come into our training, it's like, wow, I'm back in school, I'm learning something, and how exciting it would be, right, for me to be learning more of this from you. So thank you so much. I hope everybody watches benefits, and it opens a lot of doors.
Thank you very, very, very much for inviting me to be a part of, one, to be a guest, and two, to be a part of what you do, you know. And when I say what you do, meaning to be a part of the school. I mean, I think very highly of it, and I do share it with others that I come in contact with. So, was that, you know, if you're a believer, then you'll be a part of it. So I'm a part of it.
Thank you. I'm a believer too. So let's all thank you. I love having you on board with the vision. And yes, it's always what it's been like. I have this open door policy that yeah, you reapply for IH certification and the staff is like, I think you should talk to Dr. Clemons. Again, the next thing you know, all of a sudden full. So that's an invitation to any student who feels like you have something to bring to the organization. Like, we're all about that for sure. So yeah, thank you again for being my guest. I look forward to continuing to work with you, continuing
Thank you.
in the future. Thank
And
you.
one of the things I always say is have an EI day.
Awesome. Have an EI day.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Clemons.